Through this module, you shall be able to know the concept of perfect competition, learn the features of perfect competition and effectively distinguish it from pure competition, identify the price and output determination under perfect competition, evaluate the equilibrium of competitive firms as well as the whole industry in the short run and the long run, analyze the level of profit in the long run and also the shutdown point in the market. Perfect competition is a market structure with unrealistic but strong assumptions like large number of buyers and sellers, free entry and exit, perfect knowledge, perfect mobility, etc.
In the world of economic theory, perfect competition is said to be an unrealistic and hypothetical market structure where there are large number of firms producing homogeneous products and there are large number of buyers demanding the same products. In perfectly competitive industries, there are large number of firms, each producing a small proportion of the industry's output, and thus each firm cannot by its own independent action affect the supply or the price. Therefore, we can say that the degree to which firms can influence the price of their product through their own strategy depends upon the market structure. In this market structure, every firm considers that it can sell amount of output at the prevailing market price. Similarly, there is no restriction for the buyers to purchase any amount from the market. The spectrum of competitive markets range from perfectly competitive markets where the buyers and sellers have little to no control over the market price, to the monopoly market situation where the industry is dominated by a single seller or supplier who has complete control over the market prices. In this module, we will be concentrating on perfect competition market and we shall be able to understand the concept of perfect competition along with all its major characteristics. A perfectly competitive market operates on a variety of assumptions, and when these assumptions are not fulfilled, then the market is said to be imperfect. We will be discussing these assumptions in detail through this module. We will learn about the structure of a perfectly competitive market and also the behavior of firms in the type of market. This is important because the firm behavior determines how the market will operate and how it will or how it can be differentiated from other market structures. Once we learn about the meaning of an economic model, we can move on to learn about how price and output is determined in this type of market structure. The conditions to attain equilibrium in each market structure is different, and knowing about the short run and long run equilibrium is an important step towards learning the market structure as a whole. Many of the assumptions in perfect competition are considered unrealistic, but this type of market structure is essential as it acts as a benchmark for other structures to be compared with.
The term market structure refers to the kind of market in which firms operate, and they can be differentiated by the number of firms in the market and the type of product they produce and sell. Now let us see the market structure of a competitive market. Competitiveness of a market depends on the power of individual firms to influence the market prices through cost and output level. If the power is zero, then the market is said to be perfectly competitive. In this case, the firms accept the prices set through the market forces of demand and supply. This type of market structure is characterized by complete absence of rivalry among the individual firms. In such market, firms can produce and sell any amount of output at the prevailing prices. Competitive behavior can be defined as the degree to which individual firms actively compete with one another. In case of a perfectly competitive market, the market power is zero. Thus, firms do not compete actively with each other. On the other hand, firms competing with each other due to some power to influence the market price and output cannot be considered a part of this competitive market. A perfectly competitive market is usually called perfect competition and is considered to be a benchmarking market with which other forms of market are compared. To what extent the other forms of market exist in the real world depends upon to what extent their market power deviates from zero market power of perfect competition. The main assumptions of this type of market structure are large number of sellers and buyers, homogeneous product, free entry and exit of firms, profit maximization, and no government intervention. These assumptions are required for a market structure to be known as pure competition. However, for a market to be called perfect competition, two more assumptions have to be fulfilled: perfect mobility of factors of production and perfect knowledge. These are the seven assumptions required for a perfectly competitive market. Now let us discuss these assumptions in detail, starting with the assumption large number of buyers and sellers. In perfect competition, there are many buyers and sellers of the product, and each one is buying or selling only a very small portion of the total product. Therefore, individual buyers and sellers have no bargaining power, and hence they are called price takers and not price makers. The next assumption is homogeneous products. In perfect competition market structure, products are exactly identical in all the firms throughout the industry, and hence they are homogeneous and perfect substitutes of each other with infinite elasticity of substitution. There is no scope for a buyer to differentiate among these products. In a perfectly competitive market structure, there is a freedom of entry or exit of firms from the industry. Entry or exit may take time, but firms have the freedom of movement in and out of the industry. If barriers exist, the number of firms in the industry may be reduced so that each one of them may acquire power to affect the price and output in the market. The next important assumption is regarding the goal of the firm. In perfect competition, the goal of all the firms in the industry is to maximize profits. Also, it is assumed that there is no government intervention or open or secret understanding between the producers in the market. This is enough for the firm to be a price taker and have an infinitely elastic demand curve. Another assumption to be considered is the perfect mobility of factors of production. All factors of production are free to move from one firm to another throughout the market. This implies not only absence of restrictions by the government or producers themselves or by trade unions in this regard, but also absence of transportation costs. Firms under perfect competition are assumed to have perfect knowledge of the market. All the sellers and buyers have complete knowledge regarding the market condition, and information is freely available to each buyer and seller. These seven are the assumptions for a perfectly competitive market. Now let us move on to the demand and revenue functions of a firm under perfect competition. The demand curve faced by each individual firm, it is horizontal, as changes in output of the firm have no significant impact on the prevailing market price. This horizontal demand curve shows that the price remains constant even with variations in the level of output. This happens because variations in the output of an individual firm has negligible impact on industry's total output. To study the demand and revenue functions, first we have to know about the total revenue, the average revenue, and the marginal revenue of the firm. The total revenue is the total amount received by the firm from the sale of its output, whereas average revenue is the amount of revenue per unit sold. On the other hand, the marginal revenue is the change in the firm's total revenue as a result of change in its sale by one unit. As long as the amount of output does not affect the market price significantly, the marginal revenue is equal to the average revenue, which is always equal to the price because of the assumption that variations in output sold by an individual producer does not have any impact on the market price. In the figure, the price is shown at the y-axis and the quantity demanded is shown at the x-axis. The horizontal line DD exhibits the firm's demand curve due to the fact that the firm can sell any quantity at the prevailing market price. Because the market price is unchanged by any variations in the output of an individual firm, the demand curve, the average revenue curve, and the marginal revenue curve of the same firm coincide and become a horizontal line parallel to the output axis. The total revenue of the firm in competitive market rises in direct proportion to the output so that it slopes upward from left to right. Now we'll be looking at the short-run price and output for a perfectly competitive firm. In the short run, some inputs are fixed and some are variable. Since the prices are determined by the market forces, competitive firms have to decide its level of output to maximize profits. This is the output at which the price equals marginal cost. In other words, the optimum level of output of the firm is the output at which the firm maximizes its profits or minimizes its loss. At this level of output, the marginal revenue of the firm equals its short-run marginal cost. The firms continue to expand their output as long as the marginal revenue exceeds the marginal cost, because by doing so they can add more to its total revenue than to its total cost. Similarly, the firm continues reducing its output as long as the marginal cost exceeds the marginal revenue, because then the firm will reduce its total cost more than its total revenue. Thus, the optimum level of output for any firm is the one at which the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. Also, the firm faces a horizontal demand curve so that the price is equal to the marginal revenue. So we can say the condition for optimum level of output can be restated as the one at which the price is equal to the marginal revenue, which in turn is equal to its marginal cost. The two conditions for optimal level of output and price in the short run can be explained with the help of few functions. We know that total profits are equal to the total revenue minus the total cost. This can be written as pi equals to total revenue minus total cost. Differentiating this total profit function partially with respect to Q, which is the output, and setting it equal to 0 gives delta pi divided by delta Q, which is equal to delta total revenue divided by delta Q minus delta total cost divided by delta Q. This is set equal to 0. This can also be written as delta total revenue divided by delta Q equal to delta total cost divided by delta Q. The left-hand side of the function represents the slope of total revenue curve, that is, the marginal revenue curve, whereas the right-hand side of the function represents the slope of total cost curve, that is, the marginal cost curve. Thus, the first order condition for the short-term equilibrium is the marginal revenue equals marginal cost. The second order condition for profit maximization of a perfectly competitive firm requires that the second derivative of the function to be negative. Hence, delta square pi divided by delta q square should be kept equal to the delta square total revenue divided by delta q minus delta square total cost divided by delta q square. This must be negative for the profit function to be maximized. That is, delta square total revenue divided by delta q square minus delta square total cost divided by delta q square. This should be made less than 0. Thus, we can write this as delta square total revenue divided by delta q square less than delta square total cost divided by delta q square. This side represents the slope of marginal revenue curve and this represents the slope of marginal cost curve, so that the slope of marginal revenue curve is less than the slope of marginal cost curve. This implies that the marginal cost must have a steeper slope than the marginal revenue curve, so that the marginal cost curve must cut the marginal revenue curve from below, as we can see in the diagram. The slope of horizontal marginal revenue curve in perfect competition is 0, and the second order condition can be modified as delta square total cost divided by delta q square greater than 0. That is, marginal cost must be rising or the marginal cost curve must have a positive slope. Thus, at the point of equilibrium, the following conditions must be satisfied, that is, marginal cost equals marginal revenue and marginal cost must be rising at the point of equilibrium. Now let us focus on the short-run equilibrium of a perfectly competitive firm. A firm in the short run does not necessarily make excess profit. The profit or loss of the firm depends upon the average total cost at the point of equilibrium. In the panel A, the SMC is the short-run marginal cost curve, and the horizontal marginal revenue curve represents the marginal revenue as well as the price level. If the short-run average cost curve depicted by SATC curve fall below the price at equilibrium as shown in the figure, the firm earns excess profit equal to the area PABE. Similarly, in the panel B of the diagram, we can show the scenario in which the firm may incur losses. If the short-run average total cost fall above the price shown in the figure, the firm makes a loss equal to the area FPEC. In case of losses, the firm will continue to produce only if it covers its average variable cost. Otherwise, the firm will decide to shut down because by discontinuing its operation, the firm can minimize its losses. Hence, the closing point of the firm is the point at which it covers its variable costs. The closing point or the shutdown point of a firm can be explained through a diagram. As we can see in the figure, the MR curve is the marginal revenue curve and the PZ represents the price level. The short-run marginal cost curve cuts the marginal revenue from below. The short-run average total cost curve is the U-shaped cost curve and it can be divided into SAFC, that is, the short-run average fixed cost curve, and the SAVC, the short-run average variable cost curve. The point Z in the figure shows the level at which revenue covers the variable cost. At this point, the marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue, which is equal to the average variable cost. If the price fall below the PZ, the firm does not cover its variable costs and it's better off if it's closed down. In the short run, the industry will be in equilibrium at the price at which quantity demanded will be equal to the quantity supplied, and at that price the market clears. In the figure, DD dash represents the industry demand curve and SS dash represents the industry supply curve. The industry is in equilibrium at the price PE star at which the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal to QE star. In short run, the firms may earn excess profit as seen in the panel A, wherein the area PE star EBA represents the profits. Or the industry may also suffer losses as seen in the panel B, where the area PE star ECF represents the losses. However, in the long run, firms that make losses and cannot cover at least average variable cost will close down. Now we can move on to study the long run equilibrium in perfect competition. In the long run, all factor inputs and costs of production are variable. The firm will attain equilibrium at the point where price equals the long run marginal cost of the firm. The supernormal profits enjoyed by few firms in the short run attract new firms into the industry. This increases the market supply of output in the long run and thus leads to lower market price until all firms get normal profit, resulting in a no profit, no loss situation. On the other hand, if the firms in the industry suffer from losses during short run, then they will leave the market in the long run. This leads to reduced market supply of output until all firms remaining in the market get normal profit. We will get an idea about the long run equilibrium in the industry through panel A. With new entrants in the market, supply increases from S to S dash. However, the price lowers to P dash and thus resulting in normal profits in the industry. First, let us start with the long run equilibrium for firms. In a competitive market, in long run, the equilibrium of all the firms produce at lowest point on their long-run average cost curve and get normal profit as shown by the point E in the panel B. The firm is making supernormal profits at price P star, working with the plant whose average cost is SAC1. This firm will have an advantage to build new capacity and will move along its long-run average cost curve, being attracted by supernormal profits enjoyed by this kind of firms. Some new firms will enter into the industry. Due to this, quantity supplied in the market will rise and the supply curve in the market will shift to the right. Then the price will fall until it reaches the level P dash at which the firms reach equilibrium. At this point, industry is also in the long run equilibrium. Then the long run average cost curve shown in the panel B will be the final cost curve. Thus, the condition for the long run equilibrium of the firm is that the long run marginal cost should be equal to the price and also to the long run average cost. Thus, long run marginal cost equal to long run average cost, which is equal to price. The short run plants work at its optimal capacity at the minimum point of the long run average cost, as we had seen in the earlier diagram. Thus, the minimum point of long run average cost and the short run average cost coincide at the equilibrium output level, that is, the optimal level. At the same time, the long run marginal cost and the short run marginal cost cuts the long run average cost and the short run average cost at their corresponding minimum points respectively, so that we can say that short run marginal cost is equal to the long run marginal cost, which is equal to the short run average cost equals to long run average cost. This in turn will be equal to the price and the marginal revenue. However, when all firms are producing at the minimum point of their long run average cost, they reach a price at which all the firms are in equilibrium and earn only normal profits. This is the situation when the industry is in long run equilibrium. This can be explained through a diagram. In the first panel, DD dash represents the demand and SS dash represents the supply. Point E is the point of equilibrium for the industry. In the second panel, long-run marginal cost curve cuts the long-run average cost curve at the minimum point, thus producing optimally at point E. In the same way, in the short run also there is an optimum production with short run marginal cost curve cutting short run average cost curve at its minimum. This is how the long run equilibrium of the industry can be derived. This module would have helped you in understanding the concept of perfect competition and its various characteristics. We have learned about the structure of the market in case of perfect competition as well as the behavior of firms in this market. This helps in distinguishing perfect competition from other market structures. You would also be able to analyze the different profit levels of the firm at long run and short run, along with price and output determination under this market structure. Perfect competition attains long run equilibrium at normal profits, and this feature sometimes makes it unrealistic.